later on when we get to our open public session. This meeting is also being recorded and will be available for later viewing on Cohasset 143 TV. We will do a roll call vote, and then I will ask for a motion to go into executive session. We will come out of executive session and rejoin the open meeting in another spot at approximately 7:00 p.m., at which time I will go through the public session protocol for asking questions, etc. So with that, we'll do a roll call.
Jack Creighton here.
Corey Evans here.
Diane Kennedy here.
Harry Thompson here.
Great, thank you. Paul Schubert is hoping to join us later, but he had a conflict for at least the first hour of this meeting. Okay, next I will ask for a motion to go into executive session under exception number 3 to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares. I do declare we will be discussing ongoing labor negotiations with a number of bargaining units, as well as drainage easements involving the Treats Pond area. Is there a motion?
Can I just say so moved, because I don't have a copy of all that.
No, absolutely. That's why I read it.
So moved.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we will do a roll call.
Jack Creighton, aye.
Corey Evans, aye.
Diane Kennedy, aye.
Harry Thompson, aye.
Okay, we're now in executive session. Please, Justine, tell us what we need to do and where we need to go.
We're about to go live on Facebook. We're on for 3, at least they're on us.
Okay.
So we should be almost good to go here. Once you call your members.
Okay. I'll just, while we're waiting for Jack, I'll just ask if there's anybody here. I guess I'll just do my little spiel about where obviously welcome. We just came out of executive session. We opened the public meeting earlier at 7:00. You're watching on the Zoom platform or live streamed on Cohasset Facebook and Cohasset 143 TV. Anyone from the public who is interested in participating in the meeting should do so on the Zoom platform. The link is at the top of the agenda, which is posted on the town website, cohassetma.org. Members of the board and other scheduled participants will be able to participate in the meeting when called on by the chair. Members will be able to ask questions of any participant, and all votes taken at the meeting will be by roll call. Any comments from the public who are not part of the meeting will be done through the question and answer chat feature below. Please type in your name, your address, and we will read your question if appropriate and have somebody answer to it. This meeting is also being recorded and will be available for later viewing on Cohasset 143 TV. If anyone here from the public would like to speak, please type into the question and answer period. I'll give it just a few seconds. If we don't see you, I'm going to move on because we're a little bit behind in the agenda, and I will recognize somebody if they come in late with a public comment. Okay. All right, we are all here. There's nobody in the gallery that I think is here for public comment, so I'm going to turn it over to the community update. Chris or one of the chiefs or Pam, who's starting us tonight?
I believe we're going to have Pam start us tonight.
Chris, did you get the latest PowerPoint presentation?
Yeah, hold on 1 second. I do.
It's kind of depressing, Pam.
Hold on. Oh, wow, it's bigger. Okay. Yes, I do have it. You ready to go?
I'm ready to go.
Yikes.
Yeah,
it's called
so
a spike, huh?
here's a snapshot of what's been happening in Cohasset. I would say we're really kind of following all the trends, both nationally and statewide. We had a big November. We had 42 cases in November and 48 in all the other months from March through October. So November, the case numbers really took off. December, we're halfway through. Today is the 15th, and it's projected to be even higher than November. So there's our warning just to begin the presentation.
Wow.
Next slide, please, Chris. The governor spoke today and updated with new numbers statewide. So these are statewide numbers. There was a big increase post Thanksgiving. So there's a lag after the holiday because typically, the infectious period lasts about 5 days before the onset of symptoms. So the week of December 1st, the 7-day average was about 2,400 cases per day. By December 8th, another week later, it was up to 4,800 cases per day. That's an increase of 96%. The positivity rate's gone way up. Pre-Thanksgiving, it was 2 to 3%, and now it's currently 5.7%. And hospitalizations are way up since Thanksgiving. Hospitalizations have increased 93%. The number of people in ICU beds are up to 73%, and the number of people intubated is up 104%. And sadly, deaths are up 84%. So we're really trending in the wrong direction now at this point.
Just not much to say other than it's
No,
really
I don't know what
depressing.
happened to our presentation, but so the governor, when he spoke today, people were pressing him, based on these really poor numbers, was he going to shut things down? And we just recently had the rollback to phase 3, step 1. And so in essence, what he did during that was they decreased the capacity limits to a lot of businesses, things like gyms and stuff, and increase mask usage. So before in the gym, you got to not wear your mask when you were on equipment if you were 14 feet apart. And so now you have to wear a mask all the time. So, I mean, you can't really do much more than decrease the capacity, increase mask, because the next step after that is shutting things down, which I know is the last thing he wants to do.
Anybody?
So next slide, please, Chris. So just to kind of jump to the next topic is testing. Last week, Corey asked where the closest place was to get testing, and it wasn't good at that point. But now, luckily, Hingham has opened up a new testing site. It's at on Cushing Street at the old Hingham Light Plant. They're open Monday through Saturday, and you should make an appointment online. It's open for Hingham residents only early in the morning from 7 to 10, but after 10 o'clock, you can sign up as a Cohasset resident. So the testing is inside. You have to, make sure you dress warm because likely you're going to be lined up outside and bring your mask. And there is potentially some cost to it if you're asymptomatic and if you're asymptomatic or you don't have health insurance. Either way, you got to pay out of pocket $140. If you are symptomatic, then your insurance company probably will pay for it, and then you'll just get billed like for the copay or something. So if you go to this testing site, make sure number 1, you sign up online. Number 2, bring your ID, your health insurance card, and a credit card if you have to pay. Next slide, please. All right, this is really hard to read, but basically what it's kind of doing is laying out when do different groups get a vaccine in Massachusetts. So Massachusetts is going to get about 300 doses in the month of December. So that of the 300,000 doses, 180 are from Pfizer, and those are the super cold ones. And then 120,000 will be Moderna, and those are more reasonable, being kept in like just a standard freezer. So because Pfizer's coming out first, those super cold ones, they can only go to certain places that can handle that. Like the town of Cohasset's not going to get that. They're going to go to hospitals, like big hospitals, like Mass General and all the Boston hospitals. And so the first people up are going to be hospital workers. Those are all the people that are actually facing COVID patients directly. So they'll be number 1. And then number 2 will be the long-term care facilities, and CVS and Walgreens, who can also handle those like super cold storage vaccines. They're going to be delivering it and administrating administering the vaccine to the long-term care facilities. Then after that comes emergency, like police, fire, and then after that is more like congregate settings like prisons and homeless shelters and places like that. So phase 2 is when the town of Cohasset, like, Mary's clinics and stuff will probably kick in. And so that's a little bit later. That's more like February, April. I mean, that's what DPH is telling us now. I mean, who knows? Maybe we'll get vaccine in January, but for right now, that's what we're projected to get. So that will be people with 2 comorbidities. So people like with diabetes or have obesity or something like that. They'll be the first up in phase 2. And then the next group is early education, K through 12 teachers, grocery store workers, DPW, utility type of people, public health, and then people age 65 and greater, and then people with 1 comorbidity. And then finally in phase 3, which is again just projected to be April through June, is the general public that doesn't fall into one of those categories. I'm sure this is going to change through time, as the vaccine gets rolled out. Hopefully manufacturing will get pumped up and other vaccines will get approved. Like I said, Pfizer's approved, Moderna's supposed to get approved this Friday. AstraZeneca won't be too far behind. Johnson & Johnson's supposed to come up with one pretty soon. So hopefully it will really start rolling this winter. Yeah, I'll talk more about vaccines later when we talk about health goals. So go ahead, Chris, I'm sorry. And Chief Sylvia is going to talk about the holidays.
So the other thing the governor spoke about today was obviously, as Pam has already mentioned, we had a huge uptick after Thanksgiving. Now, we tried to do an education with the public on what we should and shouldn't be doing around Thanksgiving. And unfortunately, as the governor outlined today, the uptick is really from people that socialize together outside of their little bubble, their family bubble, the people that they live with. So it was socialization that has caused the uptick. And that's what the fear is as we go through Christmas and Hanukkah and Kwanzaa and into New Year's Eve, that hopefully, I think as the governor, if I could quote him, he said, "I've already seen this movie." So we're hoping that people will understand that that's what drove the uptick. If you can go to the next slide, Chris, please. I'll just keep talking. So as it says, there are safe ways to celebrate the season, and there's also this. So there are ways to make your winter holidays safer. Obviously, virtual is always better than in person. We were doing it last spring when we were all in lockdown. If you're going to get together with people, outside is always safer than inside. That's obviously a constant. And if you are going to be out and about, wear your mask. Stay 6 feet apart. Avoid any crowded, poorly ventilated indoor spaces. So if you're going to be indoors, even when it's cold, open windows. Obviously, good hand hygiene. And we put the plug in here again about the flu shots. If you haven't received a flu shot, I think Mary still might have had a couple of doses left. I think she's getting pretty low at this point. But if you haven't had a flu shot, it's really wise that you do. Okay, next slide, please, Chris. Okay, so again, these are coming from CDC. So if you are going to attend a holiday celebration of some sort, it's along the same lines of what we talked about for Thanksgiving. Again, wear your mask, stay away from people, but make sure you manage expectations of what's going on. Smaller groups are obviously limited number of guests. Provide masks for those that don't have them. Obviously, clean and disinfect. And, you know, if you're going to celebrate indoors, open some windows. Airflow is the virus not building up in a closed space is a good thing. And again, hand washing or sanitizer. Next slide, please, Chris. Again, this is along the same lines of what we talked about for Thanksgiving, as far as if you're going to go someplace, bring your own food and drink. And then the big one here is the winter travel. Again, there was a big uptick in travel, and we saw what happened with that around Thanksgiving. The governor is really pushing hard for try to restrict your travel. If it's only one Christmas that you're going to miss out on, and it's one of those things that you don't want to put others at risk by traveling. If you can find a way to do things virtually and not have to travel, it's so much better. And if you do travel, again, remember what the rules for the state are: testing or quarantine, up to 10 days if you're not going to be tested. So luckily, as Pam has already outlined, testing is becoming more available, and that testing in Hingham, they were offering, or saying that the return on the test could be anywhere from 24 to 36 hours. So it's better than it's been. It beats the death out of 6 days. So that's a step in the right direction. Okay, next slide, please, Chris. Okay, I guess that was it. So again, the big push, you're going to see this coming out from DPH in the next couple of days. That was part of the presentation today with the governor in the press conference, was that he was speaking very much about what happened over Thanksgiving, and then Secretary Sutters was talking very much about the things that we need to change so that we can, in fact, not have another uptick around the rest of the holidays through the rest of the month of December. So hopefully people will understand that, that what happened with the one-day event or a weekend event of Thanksgiving versus, as I mentioned, Hanukkah, Christmas, Kwanzaa, right into New Year's. If we, the public, don't try and manage ourselves, wear our masks, stay socially distanced, again, he mentioned this multiple times today, don't congregate with people that you don't live with. That was a big part of the message today. So hopefully we'll all understand, and hopefully we'll get this thing at least under control through the rest of the month of December. So that's what I had for COVID as far as things go today.
Okay.
Any questions?
Corey?
Yeah, I just have one comment. I wanted to ask somebody to elaborate a little bit on the testing site in Hingham. We did have one citizen comment from Katie Dugan about scheduling an appointment online seems to be more than a week out. So any information you can share with the community about how busy that testing site is it a realistic option for a Cohasset resident? Anything you all have heard about in regards to that?
Well, I'll just jump in real quick. The town administrator in Hingham mentioned it this morning. It was actually the first that we had heard of it. So I don't know if Pam has any further intel on how long it's going to take.
Yeah, I don't know. I know, like last week or 2 weeks ago, whenever the last time I was here, I know like Health Express, it was just overwhelmed. So this seemed great. Like this could, take on that excess, but it sounds like this is now swamped as well. It's too bad.
I just looked it up, and it is next week. But again, you can get an appointment for next week, and if somebody needs the appointment, if it's a medical situation, they can go to their doctors or healthcare provider. This would be more likely for somebody that might have traveled, and they should be kind of quarantining anyway. So it's just another option. There is at least a week wait. Carrie?
Katie Dugan just said next week is not a testing option, but I also wanted to ask, I've had some people reaching out asking if we're considering rolling back, you know, farther, like some other towns and cities have decided to in the past week. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of a lose-lose situation, right? We're going to
Yeah.
upset people, whatever we do, but I didn't know if this discussion had been brought up with your smaller group at this point.
No, not at this point, Carrie. So going back, the next step would actually mean closing down things like gyms and stuff. And we haven't talked about doing anything like that. It hasn't come to that yet.
If you were wondering what the next step looks like, it is what Boston has just done.
Mm-hmm.
They've gone back to step 2.
Yeah.
So that's what you saw for what they closed and what they're trying to operate with. So that would be the next one back. I don't know. I think from the standpoint of the working group, we've been trying to take our lead from DPH and from the governor's office. So he was, you know, again, if you hadn't had a chance, or if you didn't have a chance to see the governor's press conference today, he's pretty wound up. And, you know, it's really that simple. He's disappointed with the way things have percolated since Thanksgiving. And he's trying to get everybody to understand that that this is not headed in the right direction. So hopefully people will take that and run with that we really need to double down on our safety procedures so that we don't get each other sick.
Jack, did you have a question?
Well, first of all, I want to let people know that the one at Hingham, we signed up online. We're going to be going skiing, and Maine requires a certain test within 72 hours. We had no problem signing up. We signed up, we got an appointment. It's by appointment only. Some of the other sites that used to have lines that are now appointment only, I think it is, you know, I certainly think it is much more doable to get those tests. So people should go online and sign up plenty of time, and 24 hours, maybe 36, but they said 24 hours, you have your test. So we should all be doing that. And the other thing is that I think one of the things that has been, we should be aware of, that as a larger and larger number of people have been exposed, you're going to have more cases. I do think that we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel with all of these. And for planning, for municipal planning, I think we'll be able to look forward to a summer in which Cohasset reopens. And I think our small businesses are really, really hurting. And we in a town need to do whatever we can to help them survive this very brutal winter, because it's hard on them. And we want them to stay. They're an important part of the character of Cohasset. So help your small business if you can. It's important. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Any other updates? Chief, Glenn, Chris?
So the only other update is obviously there seems to be a weather event coming in. So Glenn might want to pick up from here and give some update on that.
The weather event that we're hearing is coming in our discussions with National Weather Service and MEMA today, is that it most likely won't be an event where there's a long power outage. That's the part that I just want to remind folks, is that
Believe it when I see it.
In the past, we've tried to help with power outages by opening a warming and charging center for people's devices. We're not going to be able to do that this year. We have been working with PM and looking over the different facilities we have to find out how we could distance people, or how we could go by appointments so people could do charging and like that. We haven't come up with a workable solution yet. So for this storm coming up, folks, I would encourage you to charge up your devices tomorrow night and go easy on them during the day Thursday, because we are not going to be able to help at this storm. But I think everything else is in place to respond to the storms like we normally do successfully.
And from a timing standpoint, just as we were coming on air tonight, we were just watching the news again, and they've kind of backed things up a little bit so that the storm is going to come in late overnight or wee hours of Thursday morning, and it does appear that it's going to be lasting through most of the day. That being said, had a quick conversation with Superintendent Sullivan, and he is already making plans for Thursday. So there is a very good possibility that the kids don't get snow days anymore. They just get a remote day. So they will probably be going remote on Thursday. He was going to be, I'm certainly not trying to steal his thunder, but he said he's already notified the parents that that's probably coming. And he may make that decision as early as tonight. It seems to be pretty cut and dry that all the weathermen, whether it's the Weather Channel or the local weathermen, are all telling us that we're looking at about a foot of snow at some point over the course of Thursday. So you won't even have to go to Maine, Jack, to go skiing. You can go to Blue Hills.
There's a difference between Blue Hills and Sugarloaf. That's what I've heard anyway.
Just a little.
A little.
You know, I'm going to try to restrain myself, but there's a lot of the town today that was out of power for 5.5 hours, and almost everybody's working from home, and I just can't tell you how frayed people's nerves are that are trying to work and don't get paid if they don't work from home. And anyway, I came home to a dark house, and the lights came on just a little bit before 6 o'clock today for us. So obviously this is something we talk about frequently because it is a frequent issue. And I think just to the extent that we can stay on top of the outages and communicating with people while they still have a charged phone as best we can. It is supposed to be a fluffy snow, which makes me feel a little bit better, but I'm still a little nervous that you know, you can have remote education, but not if you don't have electricity. So so let's just be vigilant and listen and hear and try to keep the community as updated as possible. And I'm looking at those of you who have been doing so for 9 months now. So I appreciate everything, and just know, as I know you do, that this is, everybody's working on some frayed nerves. And I think if there is a major electrical outage, we may need Chief Quigley more than we usually do on a given day. So anyway, so hang in there. I'm so sorry. It's just been a really tough year. But
Quigley,
thank
do
you.
you want to update on everybody what that power outage was about today?
Sure. It was a motor vehicle versus a pole, North Main Street by the Little League field. Gentleman, looked down at his phone, went off the road, took out the pole. It impacted Sawyer. It was one of the feeder lines again, and impacted Sawyer Street down to Jerusalem Road, some of the offshoot roads there. Before executive session, I checked, the road was still closed. I haven't heard anything different yet. So that they had placed a pole in the ground. There was 4 crews from National Grid. They're working on it, and they were trying to redirect power, but I'm not exactly sure if the road is still closed right now.
You know, and I don't want to, I understand that kind of stuff is going to happen. It's just the length of time, like I think everybody accepts that power outages are going to happen, but when some people are back up after an hour and some are 2 and some are 5.5 hours, which is almost an entire workday. It's
just so the board's aware, obviously, we, the town of Cohasset, have been holding National Grid's, hate to use this term, feet to the fire from the fire chief, but their feet to the fire in trying to improve the infrastructure. And today, what I witnessed was they were able to reroute power and get the schools back up and running very quickly, and certain sections up very quickly. So this, with National Grid, is an ongoing project. And you better believe that the next question is going to be, okay, well, you were able to get the power as far as North Main Street and Jerusalem Road. What's wrong with the rest of this? So we'll have that conversation with them. It's one of those after action pieces that we always talk about. And it was interesting to watch. Again, a bright blue sky day, but they did get the power back to the schools very quickly. So it wasn't perfect. It was better, and they still have a long way to go. So we hear you loud and clear, Madam Chairperson, and we will take it up with the people that we need to take it up with.
Thank you. I know you do. I appreciate
You
it.
know, at some point, I think the town ought to, this is long-term, consider getting all of our utilities underground. It's coming. It's any new division building should require that. I know it's expensive, but sooner or later we need to get that done.
And if we're done with this community update, thank you all again. I'm going to ask the board if it's okay if we jump over the MBTA update, which is
Yes.
really good news, but we'll do that later. And it's a perfect segue into, we do need to tie up a loose end that we had with the Alternative Energy Committee and Tanya Bodell. To Jack's point, this, you know, we do, and I think Tanya mentioned this a few times that she's been here in the last couple of
And
weeks. That
could I do a quick just MBTA update? I mean, the celebration is good, but I just want to do just two quick things if you can fit me in. Is the slot for that?
Yeah, what I was going to ask if we could postpone the MBTA update till after Tanya's here, just because I don't want to make her wait any longer. Would that be okay with you?
Okay, so yeah, rearrange the agenda.
We're just rearranging the agenda. So we handle alternative energy now. We'll do a quick MBTA update and then we'll do the budget because we're so far behind. I apologize.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So anyway, we are going to have a long-term conversation and we need to. And so thus, I'm going to turn it over to Tanya. Tonight you're here because you've presented to us the last two meetings and you need some action related to third-party sites, correct?
Correct. And town sites as well. So if I could have the screen sharing, try to make it easy for the vote. Basically, we've gotten a little bit more information from the bidders about what they need to be able to get in the queue for the incentives. And it's good news because they're not expecting, and nor can we provide them with a contract at this point. We are still looking to finalize the design and also finalize some of the specifics like the aesthetics for the carports for the schools. And the school committee has given us permission to move forward with negotiations. That actually is all we need from you. If we could move forward with negotiations, a vote to award the opportunity to negotiate, to award a site to the bidders that we recommend, that allows those bidders on their own dime to move forward with procuring 5% of the equipment so that they can lock in the incentives on the federal level this year. And they're willing to do that because that's their business. If it falls through and they can't use those for us, they're grandfathered in for their next pipeline customer. So we have sort of first dibs. The other thing it allows us to do is getting the line for the state incentives, which also tend to go fairly quickly. So we've already given you sort of what the basis of our recommendation is. So tonight we're asking you to vote to approve moving forward with an award of identified project sites to specified bidders. It's an award that allows us to move forward with negotiations. It does not require us to do a contract. We can pull out at any time. It does not require us to put any money down. It's just an ability to write a letter that says we award you, bidder X, the opportunity to develop site Y. So that also would allow them to lock in the incentives. So, and as we've already mentioned many times, what's at stake is roughly $75,000 to $125,000 a year. The time frame is important because of the incentives ratcheting down on the federal level and the fact that everybody's getting in the queue for the state incentives. And I just want to do a check. Is everybody hearing me in the screen sharing?
Yep. And I was going to ask if anybody has any questions yet. Carrie?
Just one quick question, Tanya. Thank you for bringing up the aesthetic aspect. I've had a couple constituents reach out asking about the carports, making sure that we are considering aesthetics when discussing them. I assumed we were, but wanted to plant that there are people a little bit worried about those specifically.
Absolutely. And those specifically, especially at the schools, part of this whole design is to give us that award to the bidders so that they can go forward and start putting together alternative designs and looking at alternative shapes, there's been a lot of improvement. So even something installed 4 years ago looks less attractive than something that's been installed this year.
Right.
So, you know, we're moving forward with the top of the line technology, but there are choices both on what it looks like and where they can go. And given our recommended approach, we're looking at more sites than we, the town, needs. And this is for 3 reasons. One, we want to be able to use the best site that we can get. 2, we want to have negotiation power with the bidders so that they know we have other options available. And 3, we understand that some of these sites are not going to work. I mean, we hope the parking canopies at the schools are awarded, but the school committee, even though they voted to allow us to continue to negotiate, they have some real concerns about optionality, getting rid of option value on their sites, as well as the aesthetics and the appearance. But we've asked Amoresco, for example, to give us a solution that solves other problems. Give us something that doesn't, not only doesn't intercede with the traffic flow, but improves it. Something that might take into account desired parking, excess parking for Osgood, for example. So they've been asked to be creative. It's now on them. They've been through this many times before, so they weren't scared off by the school committee. They said, this is what towns do. This is how towns are, and we understand, and we want to work with you. They gave us an example of an award letter, which we've reviewed and sent to town council. Town council has a much shorter letter of intent, and we're talking to the bidders to see if that's enough to be able to get us into the Smart 2.0 queue. Select Energy for some of the other town sites, and this is exploratory, potentially Cohasset school roofs, and let me tell you why. Even though we can't do it now, Select did give us the best price of the group, and they also have the most flexibility, so that if we continue working with them, not just on the water plant site, which the Water Commission has given approval to go ahead and negotiate, subject to obviously your approval, then we can pivot and turn. If the Biden-Harris campaign and Congress all of a sudden passes some nice fat federal incentives for solar, it'd be great if we're already in the process, so that once our school roofs get replaced, we're ready to go, one after another, boom, boom, boom. Select Energy allows us to do that, and they came in with the best price. They're not going to be able to maintain that price because the incentives are wearing out, and it's just bad timing with respect to the school roofs, but it is what it is. But with no obligation, we can move forward with talking to them about what we can do on the school roofs, as well as the water plant. We've asked them to put together some proposals subject to you approving our ability to move forward with an award letter and ability to negotiate. And then Palmer Capital, our existing site, we'd like them to look at expanding the existing site. And we'd also like them to look at the 5 private third-party sites that they proposed. We don't need to go through a 30B procurement process to do that. And I'll show you in a second how these sites are all very different as far as the municipal legislation that would allow us to move forward with these sites. But 3 different bidders with a handful of different sites, it just gives us more flexibility to be able to find the best opportunity for the town, so that if something just is a no-go because it's at the wrong point in our distribution system, we can move to the next thing, all while keeping the potential opportunities on the federal and state side. So here's the example of the letter, just to give you some comfort. This is not as much of a commitment as I think we originally thought we needed. We just need a formal award letter, and under paragraph 6, it says either party may terminate this memorandum of understanding by provided written notice of termination to the other party. And there's no money down, but this letter has worked before, and the town council has provided an alternative letter that we are socializing and asking the bidders if that would work for them for purposes of getting in the queue for the state incentives. That's our goal here.
Town council.
So who at town council?
Yeah.
Michelle Leary and Chris Senior are working with them directly. I haven't worked with them.
I mean, which attorney?
So it's Rod Hoffman.
From Brooks and Durancis, yep.
Yes.
My only question on this in terms of if so you need a vote from us to proceed with this with a letter. So we would have to likely just kind of make a motion that in theory, and give signing power once council's drafted it, because we don't have the letter to review to actually vote on that. So it'd just be action to allow a letter to proceed in awarding contracts to the developers for the sites.
It's not awarding the contract because we don't
Right.
know the contract terms.
Right.
It's just awarding the bidder the opportunity to continue negotiations with us
Okay.
for a specific site.
So you had a slide earlier. Would that be the appropriate motion?
So I have the motion at the end,
Okay,
just to make
great.
it easy for you.
Thank you.
So I've
Yeah.
already talked about who we already spoke to: school committee, water committee. We've talked to you. This is our third time. Thank you. Capital budget last night, and then we're scheduled for the advisory committee. So we're making sure that we are communicating what the process is, what we did. This is where you come in. First of all, as a select board, even though with respect to the schools, the right to authorize was given to the schools under the town meeting law for 30B. That's in the first category of checks. Those are the town sites that we solicited. There's two other areas that I think I, as the chair of the Alternative Energy Committee, we can't do anything unless you authorize us. So at this point, we're done unless you say, yes, continue on with negotiations, and we agree, award as is recommended. And frankly, the town manager has the ability with his negotiation powers, obviously he'd come to you, I would expect, to get approval, to negotiate directly with Palmer Capital on the third-party sites. They're not town sites, so we don't need town approval. We don't need town meeting approval. It's a long-term power purchase agreement contract, but we're bringing it to you because these are all part of the solicitations that we got to be able to get some price transparency. So to get to what we're looking for, the proposed motion would basically be specific enough to recommend award of sites to specific bidders, as was recommended by the Solar RFP Evaluation Committee. And that includes the school roofs, Select Energy, school parking canopies, Amoresco, DPW transfer station, Palmer Capital, as a potential landfill site expansion, other town sites such as the water plant, and we can specify it to the water plant if you're comfortable with that. That'd be Select Energy. And then third-party sites would be Palmer Capital.
Okay. Any questions, Corey?
Yeah, just Tanya, thanks for your work on this as always. You mentioned in the previous meeting that there were some places that just didn't make sense. I thought school roofs was on that, but as I'm reading this, it's, if I understand it correctly, it's more of kind of a umbrella, like, you know, your board and the town manager can go through the farther along with the development of these plans. Is that correct?
That's correct. So the school roofs right now are off the table. I mean, it doesn't make sense to put them on until we replace. Every bidder told us that. It doesn't make sense to replace if we're not going to get the state funding of 40 to 50%. Right. So this just basically gives us the opportunity, you know, if a big storm hits and rips the school roof off and we're suddenly in an emergency situation where, I mean, that's of a lot of problems in a way, right? Yeah. We're in an emergency situation where we have to replace the roof, and oh joy, we've got Select Energy ready to go. They were the best bidder, and Biden-Harris just passed a 50% subsidy. We can go, right? So it's basically, all of this is just trying to maintain as much flexibility as possible because rules are changing, subsidies are changing, the queue is ebbing and flowing, the incentives are leaving and coming back because another project doesn't get built. So it's just to give us the ability to play these sites and these bidders, I'll be honest, to play the bidders against each other in negotiation. Otherwise, we give an award letter. So the school roofs, we can't move forward until they're replaced, but this just gives us some optionality if things change.
Great. Okay. Yeah, I'm in full support of this. So you know, I'll leave it to the rest of my board members if they've got questions.
Any other questions, Carrie or Jack?
I have a question.
Yep, go ahead, Jack.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Where are we getting the panels and the data and the control data and all the technology? What sources? Are these American products?
This is part of the negotiation. They have proposed certain products, but in many cases, they've given us a panoply of potential products.
Okay, so you don't know what they're proposing?
No,
I
I
mean-
do. I just not off the top of my head, but it's all subject to negotiation.
Well, I think I saw one of the earlier slides that some of the panels are Chinese manufacturers. Is that correct?
Some of them probably are. And some of them may be another manufacturer. I'd have to go back and look at the proposals.
Okay, I just thought one of the earlier slides had said that. And I guess I would have a problem awarding with some of the technological data pirating that's been going on. I'd be very careful about some of the Chinese technology. Huawei's been a real issue internationally. And so, I mean, that would be the problem that I would have with that is I'd like to know what we are taking our money is and what we're purchasing.
Well, and that most certainly would be part of the negotiations and discussions. Jack, you may or may not know, I was working with the Department of Homeland Security on 2 separate public-private partnerships on exactly this issue back in 2015 and 2016.
That's why I asked.
Yeah, so, you know, this is obviously top of our mind. There's also National Grid has requirements for cybersecurity. And increasingly, anybody who works in the industry, including consultants, are subject to these same cybersecurity requirements. So this is definitely a growing set of standards, and there's something called the NIST standards associated with the data that are in place, as well as standardization. So I fully hear you and agree. That is not set in stone at this point. This would be an approval for us to be able to move forward with the negotiations tied to that. And this is good to hear your concerns, and we'd make sure that we would take that into account when we go to the negotiating table.
Because I'm strongly in support of this. I think it's a great idea. And I have some personal experience with solar. But I do think, and I speak for a lot of people in town, that would be a very difficult thing for a lot of people to deal with. So I'm glad you hear what I'm saying. And I knew the work that you'd done earlier. I just wanted to bring that so the public understands that we're aware of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Carrie, you had a comment or a question?
No, I'm ready to vote. I'm in support.
Okay, if somebody would like to make a motion, and just on Carrie's earlier comment about the school parking canopies, I have a little bit of an aesthetic, reluctance to it, but I think ultimately a lot of these projects will have to go through planning, and there'll be a lot of opportunities for public comment. And at this point, it's really just allowing Tanya and her team in conjunction with procurement officials in town hall to get us something that we can actually decide on as a community. So negotiate these deals. So if somebody would like to make a motion based on Tanya's proposal.
Just trying to check what the exact language is you need from us.
Yeah, I'm trying to word it too.
Yeah.
I guess I'll take a step at it. I would like to make a motion that the board gives permission to the town manager to award sites to allow further negotiations. The sites that have been recommended today by the evaluation committee for the highest cost savings and optionality for the town. This means just to proceed with negotiations and finalize site design in terms of contract in order to obtain the 2020 incentives. However, this motion would not mean that we wouldn't still require town permitting and other processes.
Tanya, does that work?
It does. And I think if you can specify as part of that school roofs to Select Energy, school parking canopies, Tamaresco.
Before we get a second, you want to amend that, Corey? Yep.
Yep, I will amend the motion to include specifically Select Energy and Moresco, Palmer Capital, Select and Palmer Capital as the specific bidders to work with at the designated sites.
Okay. Good.
Second.
All right, there's a second. Okay, we're going to do a roll call vote beginning with Jack.
Jack Creighton, aye.
Corey Evans, aye.
Diane Kennedy, aye.
Carrie Thompson, aye.
Okay. We got everybody. Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much.
Thanks,
We
Tanya.
appreciate it.
And
Go get it.
Keep us
Well,
posted.
we will,
Thank
but
you.
not as frequently as we have been. So
No, thank you.
and happy holidays to everybody.
Thank
and
you. Happy
New Year.
holidays.
You too,
Appreciate your
All
work.
right. Very good. Bye-bye.
I would have tried to move us along. Corey, want to just give a quick update on MBTA?
Sure. Big news on the APTA. The latest draft proposal does not include limiting the vote. It does significantly alter it, though. We don't have a direct Hingham to Boston boat anymore. It goes to Hull first. So a 25-minute boat is now a 55-minute boat. So the towns that have gotten together for some advocacy is going to try to make that point that we really need 2 boats, because also if you leave from Hingham and you go to Hull and the boat is full, a bunch of people in Hull are going to be stranded. So we're working to try to get that message out. The other thing is that Greenbush, no trains after 9 o'clock and no trains on the weekend. Greenbush on the weekend is currently at 52% of its pre-COVID levels. And that tells us there are a lot of people that are taking the Greenbush on the weekends that probably rely on it. So it's something which can be easily swept under the rug. We lost this train on the weekends, but it does affect a lot of people. So we're going to try to make that known to the committee. This was a proposed vote that was voted on. However, like anything, there's always a lot of stuff in flux. So we're going to keep trying to limit how much damage this reduction in service does to our town.
Our work is not done.
No.
Great. And I do think that the fact that we got this far is a testament to the advocacy of both all the residents in the local communities and us teaming together with our partners in Hingham, Hull, and Scituate. So I'm really glad we did that. And thanks, Corey, for carrying the flag on this for us. Okay. I'm going to move us right along to, and I'm sorry that we're running so far behind, to the FY21 budget update. The good news is there's no bombs in the budget. So this should be a pretty straightforward conversation. Dawn, if you want to reveal yourself, and Chris.
Chris will be here in a second, Diane.
Okay, that's all right. Dawn's here. You can get rolling if you'd like.
Good evening. Yes,
Good evening.
Chris can jump in and bring up any of these schedules. I'm sure you have them already. November, another great month. Start with the general fund. Our revenues at this point are 48.8% of the budget collected. Local receipts, everything except for motor vehicle excise is either at or exceeding our budget expectations. As I've talked the last few months, motor vehicle excise, we really won't see that first big commitment until January, February. So with that being said, we're in really good shape on the revenue side. We're slightly down year over year, but that is to be expected. We reduced our revenue estimates for local receipts. So from a budget to actual standpoint, we're in great shape. On the expenditure side, same thing. All our departments are either at or below our expectations.
Wow.
Within the various departments, there's about 322,000 in there related to COVID that will be reclassed to various grants by the end of December. The majority of that you'll see within public safety. When you're looking down the percentages of spent, you kind of see 47.4. That kind of is a bit above some of the other departments. And that's really why I'd say out of that 322, at least 275 to 300 is probably within public safety. That doesn't mean that there aren't other expenses within budgets that haven't been identified yet. I've spoken to facilities, and I'll be working with some other departments to kind of go through at the end of December, just to see if there's anything kind of COVID related that we can charge to that grant. The CARES grant will have a period of reconciliation after December anyway, to make sure all our activity is properly reported and categorized. So I expect a little bit more to be picked up and reclassed. So overall, we're looking really good in the general fund. Again, revenues are hitting or exceeding expectation. Our departments are doing well within their budgets, and really nothing to worry about at this point from either side.
Quick question, Dawn, regarding the CARES Act money. Do we anticipate using everything, every last penny that we got?
I'm going to do my best. I mean, right now, based on things that we have ordered and spent to date, we've spent a little over the allotment from CARES. And as I mentioned before, Glenn's done a great job of putting together reimbursement requests to FEMA. Unfortunately, we've still not heard anything back from those requests. And even though we are comfortable with what has been submitted, that we feel a lot probably won't get kicked out.
Right.
You just don't know. You know,
There
I've
could
had
be
colleagues
something.
that got almost half of their requests kicked out because it related to school. They're really cracking down. They want it mostly to be related to first responders, police, fire, emergency management. So, you know, we're doing as much as we can to take full advantage of this grant opportunity, and we work with the schools to identify some other stuff with their grants. And so we've been really paying attention to this and trying to maximize these funding opportunities.
Great, thank you. Thanks for
Sure.
getting the summaries out early. Any questions? Chris, any?
If no questions, we can move on to
The only update for everyone to know is that the state did adopt its budget. So the numbers are locked in for this year, which is good news.
Great. The governor approved.
Governor signed off on all the numbers. He's planning to use less of the reserve fund of the state's rainy day fund than the legislature authorized him to, which is good.
Good.
But it kept our local aid at last year's level, which we had not projected. We actually projected decreases, so that's a good.
That's great.
There's some new expenses. There was some additional expenses on the charter school side, which, you know, just happens sometimes, so it kind of washes out. But we're okay. The numbers were really okay for us.
All right. Good. Dawn, you want to carry on?
Yeah, sure. Sewer fund. So just all three funds have done great through November. Sewer funds, 48.5% of the budget collected. 46.7% of the usage has been collected, which is great, a bit above ahead of schedule. And again, that follows the water usage. So water usage has been up the first 2 quarters. So we would expect that. And so it's good to see that happening. Another big driver of the revenue are connection fees. They've had a number of connections through November, 103,000 of connection fees within November alone. So they're 275% of their budget. You'll see we budgeted 80,000, we've collected 220 to date. So that's great. Just especially through November, to have a line item like that where we budget conservatively to come in that high already makes me feel better already about how we may look towards year end. I know it seems early to say that, but that's a significant surplus to have at this point. So I'm very happy about that. And then on the expenditure side, we're at 57% of the total budget spent. And of that, general expenses, we're at 34.5%. So again, you know, through 5 months, that's really, we're in good shape.
Fantastic.
And then moving on to water. Another fund with great news. You know, I'm loving these monthly reports and giving you guys good news.
Especially after the community update.
Right.
It's good to know the finances are in good shape.
Yeah. So the water on the revenue side, we're at 51%. You'll see a big percentage collected on the water usage. Again, 2 quarters of better than expected usage, or higher usage, I should say. And then again, with them, it's kind of like sewer connection fees. They're 204%. We budget 40,000. We've already collected 81. So those are the 2 biggest drivers of the revenue surplus at this point.
And that theoretically would be reflected also in new growth, right? Those are clearly new construction for the most part, or?
I believe they are new construction. If they're having hookups on both sewer and water, I would assume those are new properties or new houses being built.
That was my question, by the way.
Oh, good. Thanks for
Yeah,
sending
I-
it to me.
Right.
Yeah, I can take a look, but I'm pretty sure those would all be related to brand new properties. On the expense side, same thing, conservative budgeting, and nothing too crazy happening in our system maintenance or too many issues, at least with our water main. So our operating expenses, general expenses are 31.4% spent through November. And we had a meeting today talking about the rate study, so we will be working on coming up with presentation material and stuff like that to come to the select board advisory and the many groups that we need to talk to about moving that forward.
In terms of the rate study for both water and then probably sewer, I would imagine has to do that on some kind of a semi-regular basis. Does that sort of trend or work alongside a long-term capital plan? And how does that get developed? And do we see that periodically?
Well, so for the water, the rates are set for on a 5-year schedule.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, the rates are heavily dependent upon the capital improvement plan. So over the last few years, I know that Jason and the group with Wood and Kern have really done a lot of work on trying to identify projects and water mains and systems that need to be replaced. We have a lot of 100-year-old piping that needs to be replaced. You know, it's good to replace these before there's issues and we're being reactive. So yeah, the rates themselves really are heavily dependent upon capital, and then operating, you know, there shouldn't be too much variation. But, you know, we'll get into more of that when we start explaining the rate study.
Right.
And then sewer, I would like to, I don't think we'll get into an actual study this year, but that is something I'd like to take a look long-term at going forward. And maybe kind of getting into that same cycle of really taking a hard look at all their capital, what they need for the next 10 years, and trying to build a solid rate structure off of that going forward.
And that conversation will get picked up in greater detail as we look at options for sewer in January. So great. Any questions on the budget? Am I rushing, John? Did you cover everything? The 2 enterprise funds and the operating budget?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. Any other questions?
Just to remind everybody, there's been 8 straight months of water use increases, which I've been reporting year to year. Well, it's slowed down a little bit. And now, by the way, we're also out of a drought. The drought warning has been lifted, and we're back up to better levels, most certainly in the reservoirs. And so I'd say that, you know, the COVID crisis most certainly, if it's and the drought combined, I think had a really a shot in the arm for water and sewer because so many more people were home and there was so much more water usage. So this is the positive side of variability. We've seen the negative side of variability too. So as Don said, it's really important that we plan these long term so there's enough cushion. And we're also entering the season of breaks. This is the freeze thaw cycle right now. So if there's going to be breaks, they tend to happen more in the spring, and then in the winter, and then the early spring when, you know, we start to get freeze thaw cycles. So just something to be aware of.
Okay, I'm going to move us along unless anybody has a question. Just so we have 2 more big updates from Master Plan Implementation Committee and also Community Health as part of our goals update. So thank you, Don.
Thank you.
Go back to your family.
Have a good night.
Thank you. And Chris, I'm not a host, so I'm not seeing if people put up a hand or anything like that. So I don't know if you can do that, or just let me know, or just
You are now, sorry,
just or just wave to me if you want to be recognized.
You got it now.
All right, I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're a co-host.
Okay, so Katie, welcome.
Hello.
I will give you the floor, and I'm sure you have a PowerPoint. And thank you for waiting, and sorry about the delays.
Okay, I've been doing a little zoning homework that I have due next Monday, so listening and working at the same time. I don't see anybody in from my committee that held out. So if anybody sees members of the Master Plan Implementation Committee, if you don't mind promoting them, but I don't see anybody on the participants list right now. Chris, do you mind sharing the PowerPoint that I sent along?
Oh, no problem. I think Trace is going to. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me get it. Either Trace or I'll be starting it momentarily.
Okay. So this is a Master Plan Implementation Committee update. We really wanted just to come back and circle back with the full Board of Selectmen. We obviously gave you a very detailed presentation back in July that outlined our preliminary recommendations, including targeting 5 implementation priorities. And we also set out a series of goals for ourselves for year 1, and then in a series of follow-up conversations in August and September, we made some significant changes in terms of the structure as how we would support our implementation goals in terms of standing up some master plan implementation working groups, and also changing up some of the liaison positions that we have to the master plan itself. So if Chris, you don't mind going to page 2, we had set out, 4 high-level goals for ourselves around collaborating, centralizing our focus on high priority areas, communicating and cultivating resources. I think we've done a really good job in the first 6 months of really sticking to the goals broadly. Under collaborate, I mentioned that we stood up 3 working groups that support the high priority areas, and we created charges. And I really wanted to stop here and thank the citizens at large, the planning board members, the ZBA members, the open space and rec members, and the select board for helping participate and joining a number of those working groups. In addition to setting up the working groups, which I think have allowed us to really collaborate in a new way, we added 2 liaisons to the Master Plan Implementation Committee to really cover 2 subject areas, one being affordable housing and the second being historical. And so wanted to thank Peter Hobson and Julia Gleason for filling those spots and taking on an extra set of meetings. And their input has been super helpful in terms of making sure that we were staying connected to those 2 subject areas, but also 2 important committees in town. In terms of centralizing focus, I think you guys know as well as anybody what our 5 priority areas are, but for anybody in the community that's listening, the 5 implementation priorities that we laid out were the Elm Street corridor, affordable housing, economic development, zoning bylaws, and sewer planning. And talk in a minute on the next slide about what we've been able to accomplish against each of those high priority areas. In terms of communicating, we have gotten some coverage out on the Mariner about our implementation priorities. There's certainly more communication is planned, and it's something that as a committee we're aware is part of our charge. And the other piece of it is providing regular updates to key stakeholders. So you asked us to come back and give you an update every 6 months, and we plan on keeping ourselves to that commitment. And as we need to, we are always looking for opportunities to connect with other stakeholders or other boards that are going to be important to the implementation process. In terms of cultivating resources, the conclusion of this presentation is really a conversation I wanted to have with the board as you go into fiscal planning for 2022. We do have some needs in terms of specific resources for the implementation priorities. So I'll get to that at the end of the discussion today. So the next slide is really just a high level overview of what we have accomplished against the 5 implementation priorities. And I went back and I looked at all of our agendas. We've had 16 working group meetings between September and this week. So I'm super proud of the work that each of these groups have done in terms of meeting regularly, coordinating with the town staff that has been assigned to each of the priorities. And so it's been a really good group effort. As it relates to Elm Street Corridor, you guys heard the update from that last week with Jason Federico. But the keys are kind of the timeline that's been laid out. the identification of the grant opportunities and the timing cycles associated with those grant opportunities. And then obviously the beginnings of discussions about kind of the critical components of the Elm Street corridor itself, which is the road layout, the corridor, and then obviously the intersection of Elm and Border. When it comes to zoning bylaws, which is the second working group, we have on that working group been meeting quite actively. One of the first things that we undertook in our start was trying to establish a set of goals for both our 6 months leading up to annual town meeting in 2021, but also a series of longer term goals that would lead up potentially to annual town meeting 2022. You know, Jack has shared periodic updates with you on that. But we do have a set of goals that we've identified for both the short term and the medium term. And against those goals, we've set a work plan, timeline, and we've got project leads. It so happens that I'm a project lead on land alteration. And so that's why I was doing my benchmarking work as I was waiting to come and present tonight. We are working towards 2 to 4 articles for annual town meeting in 2021. And I can't definitively say what is ultimately going to come to you, but we do know that there's likely to be a notice of intent due on January 11th in terms of like which articles we'd like to bring forward. But the 4 that are under consideration are modification to the use variance language, modification to the large home review bylaw, land alteration, which would be a new bylaw, and then also modifications to the definition and the measurement of height. So those are that's kind of a high level of what's been going on at the zoning bylaw working group.
Katie,
I'm sorry.
No, can I just interrupt on the zoning? Just a quick question on that, which is, were any of the 4 articles under consideration now ones that we pulled off the annual town meeting last year? And just, do you know?
So the only one that was sort of in process is land alteration. So there was a hearing opened around land alteration, and that was a bylaw that Open Space had sponsored, Open Space and Rec had sponsored, and had started discussions with the planning board. But honestly, it was very early days. I think they had literally opened the hearing, had one discussion, and then COVID hit. So that is the only one that was caught in that COVID situation that I know of.
That trap, right? But these are obviously all discussions that the town has been having for many years, not necessarily in an open hearing format.
Yeah, and we do have a joint meeting between the zoning bylaw working group and the planning board for January, and we'll certainly go back and look. There were a couple other things open that were opened in terms of hearings by the planning board, but I'm not even sure they even got to discussions on them. We can go back and look at those and see which rise to the level of revisiting.
Revisiting, great.
Yeah.
Jack has his hand up. Now I can see hands. You're on mute. Jack, you're on mute.
Yeah, you should be glad that you should keep me on mute. But anyway, I'm here.
If only I had that kind of control.
Gonna say, if you're gonna make a motion.
You and everybody else. So, but I want people to be aware that I'm the select board liaison to this, specifically zoning. The land alteration, people should pay attention to it because it's going to be important. It has to do with, does a property owner have the ability to clear cut their land? And there's strong thoughts on both sides of that. I'm sure there's a way that we can solve it in Cohasset fashion, but people should be aware that some progress will be made and some accommodations will be made to property owners' rights. We're not going to do that. But this is a situation where you can go on the town website, see who the members are, and send us emails and participate. It's important. And similarly, another big issue is the large home review. People feel very strongly about that. And this is a time when just letting those of us in the committees know what your thoughts are, so that we have a real broad-based gauge of public opinion. So please help us out on that. It's your town. Thanks.
And Jack, you're stealing my thunder a little bit in that you're going to see on the last slide, my plea is for funding for public forums, because I do think that we need to, in addition to making pleas on a Tuesday night at almost 9 o'clock.
Right, exactly.
I think we need to do that kind of outreach to make sure that we're really nailing the policy issue on the head,
Yes.
and making sure that the policy issue that we're describing in the zoning bylaw matches up with the community's desires and wants. And again, all of these zoning bylaws that we're looking at, or aspects of them, have been discussed and come up in master plan public forums. So it's not like we're going off of a off script. But the devil is in the details, as Jack alluded to, on a lot of this in terms of how it impacts land ownership. So it's important. It's important work that people will want to focus on.
I couldn't have stolen a better speech.
Yeah. So affordable housing, as we talked about in August, and I think it was a really excellent recommendation, is that obviously we've got two committees that are active, the Affordable Housing Steering Committee and the Trust, that are meeting regularly and moving forward the housing production plan, which includes goals for both affordable housing under the legal definition under 40B, but also affordable housing that talks about diversity of housing stock, and how do we get houses that aren't kind of just the mean sales price of like $900,000 in Cohasset. And so those two committees, as I mentioned before, Peter Hobson is now on Master Plan Implementation Committee, and actually we have a member on Master Plan Implementation Committee who is interested in this subject, so she's become a liaison to the Affordable Housing Steering Committee. So we've got a lot of coordination and a lot of dialogue going between our two committees. Some of this you guys already know, but the highlights in terms of what's happened in the last 3 months are: one, the Trust approved a construction bid for 808 Jerusalem. So that's moved out of the theoretical into the actual construction of a unit. The Cohasset Harbor Inn has really, for the first time in kind of planning board history, caused a really robust conversation about our inclusionary zoning bylaw and how that will actually come to life. And I think that's been fantastic to see that come to fruition as we go through a site plan review on a major development. But it's also allowed the Affordable Housing Steering Committee to input from the perspective of the housing production plan. And so there's 3 units that are part of that discussion that will continue to work through as we go through the conditioning on that CHI plan. And then, as we all know, there's a 20-unit development at 380, 390 CJC, which has 5 affordable housing units attached to it, but we'll get credit for the full 20. And that is being monitored and inputted into by the Affordable Housing Steering Committee. So the next I wanted to talk about was economic development, and we stood up a working group on this called the Cohasset Economic Task Force. And that has begun work on probably a longer term goal of economic development and support of our local businesses, but also recognizing that during times of COVID, there were certainly some really short-term and pressing needs for our local businesses. So to start, that economic task force completed a baseline survey of our local businesses and got a much better sense of what the issues were for businesses, both in the village, but along 3A. And in response to that, has been working directly with the Cohasset Chamber of Commerce and launched a Cohasset Community Gift Card, which I know that Corey and Carrie have been super involved in, and there's been some good coverage on social media about that. And then last but not least, longer term, the Cohasset Economic Task Force is looking at other opportunities for economic development. And those include ideas like a Cohasset Community Foundation and other economic development grants. And so we'll hear more about that as we go through the spring, but those are kind of the three big accomplishments to highlight for the Economic Development Task Force. And then last but not least, sewer planning. And this has been one that I really would like to compliment the select board on their leadership and jumping in as yet another elected board that can have a conversation with our sewer commission about what our longer term sewer planning needs are as a community. So in September, there were the 2 joint meetings between the select board and the sewer commission, which I think really highlighted and focused each of the elected boards on sewer planning. And it was something that had been needing to happen. And then COVID hit, and then you guys were able to make time along with the sewer commission to have that deep dive in September. Following up on those 2 meetings in September, the sewer commission took on and completed a white paper on operations and some planning considerations about the short and the medium term. And then most recently, GHD has been selected as an external consultant to come in and work with Brian Joyce and Chris Senior and the sewer commission in terms of developing a decision matrix on some of the longer term sewer planning that needs to happen. And we'll be hearing back from GHD after they finish all of their stakeholder interviews and review the materials that have already been pulled together by the sewer commission, but also pulled together as a part of the regional planning discussions. So we'll hear back from them, and hopefully that will give us a good understanding of where our strengths are in terms of the information that we've gathered, but maybe also some additional sewer planning and some gaps that we need to fill in terms of information. So we'll know more in January or latest February on that decision matrix. So I'll pause here and see if there are any other questions from the board.
Katie, I just have one update, I think, and Lauren, I'm going to call you out on just the Affordable Housing Trust. My understanding is the RFP was just issued, so I don't think we have a construction bid yet, unless I spaced out at a meeting. One of the things I will tell you is the Affordable Housing Trust approved last week a letter to the abutters of 808 Jerusalem Road and the people in that general area, just to let them know sort of the update on what the planning was for that site, because so that we could keep them in the loop and keep a dialogue open. And Lauren, am I correct just on I think the RFP was just issued, or has it come in and since our last meeting?
Thank you. Yes, good evening, everyone. Lauren Lynn, Planning Director. The RFP for 808 Jerusalem Road was issued, and the site visit actually took place on Friday. I believe the closing date was scheduled for January 4th, but last I spoke with our procurement director, she had been intending to extend the RFP deadline by 2 weeks to allow for more time, given the holidays and COVID and everything, so that we would have a really robust response to that. But we are still actively in the bid process right now.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, any other questions? Katie, good, really good update, really great progress.
Yep. So I have one last slide, and this is the pitch for funding. So I'll have Chris pop back up slide 4, because I don't want to miss my opportunity to shake you guys down. So if you sort of think back to where we were in the spring pre-COVID, we had formed the Master Plan Implementation Committee, and as part of that process, you had asked us to go and begin our work in terms of setting priorities. But knowing that priorities was going to create work, you had the forethought, at least in the original draft of the annual town meeting, to set aside $50,000 for resources for the Master Plan Implementation Committee. Then COVID hit, and then we had to kind of restructure the town budget. So that $50,000 that had originally been earmarked specifically for Master Plan implementation became $50,000 of consulting resources for the town in total, which is, you know, completely appropriate and understandable given COVID. But as we look forward towards FY22 and planning, I do want to bring to everybody's attention that there are projects and our implementation priorities that are going to require funding and resources in order to really move them forward. And so what this chart was intended to do was kind of break out into major categories of where are we going to need to spend some in terms of putting together and soliciting professional public forum and input from the community. Where are we going to need additional consulting, project management resources? Where are we going to potentially need resources and to help with grant writing? And then, you know, in some cases like zoning bylaw, we are going to need some legal resources in order to make sure that when we get down into some of the weeds relative to specific bylaw language, that we have land council or town council involved in that process. And I don't want to presume that that's part of the general legal expenses that the town already has worked into its budget, but this is above and beyond in terms of supporting, you know, specific master plan implementation priorities. Really, the most urgent is Elm Street corridor. So most of what I'm discussing here in terms of FY22 could be handled as part of the budgeting process as you guys go through discussing what fiscal 22 should look like. But I would like to put on your radar screen that the master plan implementation committee and our priorities will likely need close to $25,000 just as a ballpark figure to support those initiatives during the next fiscal year. As it relates to the current fiscal year, you guys heard the details and the timeline associated with the Elm Street corridor. We are trying to move in a manner that keeps pace with the water work that's going to be happening and the sewer work that's going to be happening, but also allow for design and public forums. So in order to get that work done, we need to have design work and public forums completed by the end of March. And in order to do that, we're going to need some incremental consulting fees in order to support that. And so we've asked for or suggested on this slide that it's probably going to be in the range of $20,000 to $30,000. So I put up $30,000 as kind of the high end. And I've spoken with Chris and I've spoken with Lauren, and there is remaining funding in the appropriation from April of this past year, in that $50,000 for consulting fees. But I'll let Chris and Lauren speak a little bit more about their comfort level. But I do think that we need to be aware that there are going to be some funding necessary for that Elm Street corridor project.
Absolutely. And Chris, if you could also address what you need from us to move this kind of funding forward, or whether you need us to even authorize it.
Lauren and I actually met with Kay the other day to go over this this particular chart, which I think is great, by the way. It helps us plan what needs to be done to support the initiatives. And we're going to go back and take a look at where we are on the. We took grant money, consulting money out of the budget this year because it got tight. We had a separate article for everything, and we've been tapped. And we've come back to the board every time we've tapped and said, "Hey, are we good with this?" So we're going to circle back, Lauren and I, with Katie and others, and figure out what we need and how we might make it work. And then we'll come back and say, "Hey, this is what we want to do." Just and again, we understand the time sensitivity of Elm Street and its essence. It's central to the conversations that are happening with the harbor, with the village, with the master plan and the harbor plan. So
just my personal opinion is, I mean, obviously engineering is something that needs to happen, and you have some flexibility with that, but the expense for public forums is, in my opinion, almost more important at this point, particularly because in a lot of ways we have an opportunity to bring in more people because of the virtual format, so everybody doesn't have to rush to a building, but at the same time it makes it a lot harder because people aren't necessarily out and about and getting the kind of information on the street about projects. So I really value that aspect of the planning going forward.
We can properly design anything anyway. You really need the community input. I mean,
Absolutely.
Otherwise, you can't design anything. It'll be a waste of time and energy.
Right. I mean, even with these complete streets grants we got for the common, I mean, we lost a lot of time because we didn't have enough public input going in, so we had to kind of re-engineer the public comment.
And that's part of the reason why we want to front load the public forums and the design work, so that we're not caught short when the August Mass Works deadline comes up and you need to have a shovel-ready project from an engineering perspective, or from a complete streets fall grant cycle, that you have projects that you've done, not all of the work, but a significant amount of the work, so that you're ready for the grant application. And we know that if we want to be doing this work in 2022, we've got to be hitting the grant cycles in the fall of 21.
And summer. Yep. Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it sounds like the request from the Master Plan Implementation Committee, at least as it relates to Elm Street Corridor, is to come back after we've been able to kind of define the exact work and dollar amount for final approval. And then as it relates to just fiscal 22, I just put it on the radar screen that as you work through the budget, and honestly, it'll probably be a one-time expense that's allocated as part of the warrant article development. But we do have obviously the free cash flow from fiscal 20 that hasn't been allocated because we haven't had a special town meeting, that we have free cash flow available to handle not only the requests that are going to need to be made for the stabilization funds, but also one-time expenses.
Yep, got it. Jack has his hand up.
Yeah, and I also want to point out that additional funding for this, which I think is very important to have public access. I know, like, for example, when planning and conservation have hearings, to the extent that there's a private project involved, that project is certainly contributing, and if it's for that, and that's another funding source, because I do think, again, Katie, it's your point about that we do need these public forums is very good, so we're going to need that funding.
Great. Okay. Anything else? All right, Katie, thank you for your hard work.
Guys.
Good night. Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah.
Right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Katie. Well done.
Bye.
Community health, Pam and Nicole, and thank you so much for being patient. We're way behind, but I think we're going to be able to catch up. Go for it.
Pam, do you want to go first?
I'm not sure. Is there a particular order? I guess it doesn't matter. Chris, can you pull up the little presentations?
Yeah, Tracy's going to be your AV person for this round.
Or Vanna.
Yeah. There's a fair number of slides. I know there is an order to it too, and I want to say that you are first, Pam.
Okay. Mine's going to be relatively quick.
And again, just to recap, as Tracy's pulling this up, the community health goal is the largest. They're all three of the goals the select board set this year are really big and important. This one had the most facets to it. Go ahead, Tracy. So this is the one that has the most moving pieces.
Yep.
I don't know, is Miriam going to do an intro or something?
I certainly can.
Sorry, Miriam.
Hi. This year's select board goals started with a healthy community. And so it covers a number of facets, as Chris said. So Tracy, if you could go to the next slide, we'll start with health. Community health, this was the goal. And I'm going to turn it over to Pam to walk us through where what progress we've made.
Okay, so next slide. Okay, so when I talked to you guys a couple of months ago, I talked about the fact that we were going to have short-term goals and long-term goals. So at this point, the short-term, one of the first short-term goals was the increased vaccination rates. So we've had 3 flu clinics, 2 of them were drive-through and 1 was in person. they had the dual benefit of vaccinating the public for the flu and preparing us for COVID vaccination events to come this winter. In total, there were 430 doses of flu vaccine given out. 150 were high doses for senior citizens, and then there was 280 regular doses. So there's still only about 20 left. This was as of like late last week when I put this together. So if anybody out there still needs a vaccine, there's still a little bit left. One of the other, so that was for adults. Little kids have their own, well, not even little kids, school age kids have their own goals. And that's the fact that they are supposed to all get the flu vaccine by the end of December. And now today's the 15th, so we're kind of running out of time. So in Cohasset, the little kids are crushing it. Osgood and Deer Hill have 85% compliance. Middle and high school are getting there at 68% compliance. So the high school nurses and the younger school nurses have been sending out weekly reminders to everybody. And now that we're getting to the finish line, they are actually going to be reaching out and contacting individual families of kids that still haven't gotten their flu shots yet. Next slide. So the vaccination clinics are obviously going to be really important. I mentioned earlier, we're probably going to be doing them during phase 2, which is projected to be in February. Based on the flu clinics, it looks like the best format is a drive-through at the Osgood school. That works well because we can really have a nice long line extending out from Osgood through the Deer Hill all the way out to Sawyer Street. One of the things, since this is a brand new vaccine, like when you do like a flu clinic, one of the questions they always ask people is this your first time you've had a flu shot? Because if it is, you never know if somebody's going to have some kind of allergic reaction, and they usually have to pull over and wait 15 minutes and make sure that they're okay. Obviously now, no one's ever had these vaccines, so everybody's going to have to pull over 15 minutes and wait. So the Osgood School provides a good amount of space, a good parking area where people can pull over and wait for 15 minutes. So there's going to be a lot of coordination in this thing. We hope to really have a lot of people working at this to really kind of pump it through. We're going to have the public health nurse, the school nurses will be giving vaccinations, the paramedics in town. We may even need at some point to reach out to other community members that are doctors and nurses that could also provide vaccines. So it's in progress, but we've made a lot of progress in terms of planning and execution with these flu clinics. So I anticipate it's going to go well, but we'll see as it starts to roll out how much vaccine we get and how much help we need. So to be
just
continued.
in terms of the number of vaccines you get, is that usually done on a per capita basis? What the state gets a certain amount that they distribute to communities?
Absolutely, and so it's based on population. Yep. And I think it's going to be given out in waves. Like, I don't think we're just going to get one lump. I think it's going to come out in waves. So we'll see.
Thank you.
Next
is
Lauren.
Lauren taking
ask
over?
you to walk through our affordable housing update.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'll be quick about this, and we did hear a few of our affordable housing goals in progress earlier in the master plan update, but I'll just let you know that both our Affordable Housing Trust and our Affordable Housing Steering Committees have been meeting frequently, I would say approximately monthly this fiscal year. One of the major projects we have been working on collectively is 808 Jerusalem Road, which you did hear a bit about earlier. This involved the transfer of land from the tax custodian of the town to the ownership actually of the Affordable Housing Trust. This paperwork was done and completed with combination of special counsel for the Affordable Housing Trust, as well as John Ruggieri from Town Council's office. So that is complete now. And we're now at the phase where the request for proposals of the RFP for affordable housing development at this site has been posted, and we're actively receiving bids. As I mentioned, there was a site visit on Friday. There's only one interested party who attended the site visit. And as I mentioned, though this bid was intended to close the first week in January, I believe that we will be extending it for 2 more weeks to allow for more time and input into that. And in addition to 808 Jerusalem Road, another main topic of conversation this year at both the Affordable Housing Trust and the Steering Committee was discussions with the applicants for the Cohasset Harbor Inn site, otherwise known as 124 and 87 Elm Street. As folks may or may not be aware, there is an active special permit and site plan approval under the Harbor Village Business Overlay District before the planning board right now. That public hearing opened this summer and has been ongoing. It is scheduled to continue tomorrow, actually at the planning board evening at 6:30 for those who are interested. And as that site has more than 5 units of residential housing development, that does fall under our inclusionary zoning bylaw. So there is an affordable housing component that development will be needing to comply with. That is subject to the planning board's decision. That is still up for discussion at this time. But the applicant there had actually met with both the trust and the steering committee to talk over some of their potential ideas as they were preparing for discussions with the planning board, so that they could get some input as to how their proposals and what they might be thinking of doing would be cohesive with Cohasset's affordable housing goals, most notably the housing production plan that was approved in recent months. So they've been meeting actively with those groups for input on that, and those discussions will be ongoing with the planning board at this time. So with that said, I will also mention that initiatives that are going on right now, the Affordable Housing Trust is looking to amend the bylaw that goes with the trust. They're looking at opportunities to seek funding strategies in addition to those that are already incoming through the CPC funds and annual town meeting funds. So those are ongoing. The Affordable Housing Steering Committee, though they have been really focused on 808 Jerusalem Road and the Harbor Inn site projects at this time, those discussions, they are looking to 2021 to begin to start to really target some of our other options in the housing production plan and see how we might plan to meet those goals as we move forward. And the only other thing I'll leave you with is that at this time, we are still waiting on the results of the 2020 census. As we mentioned a lot, the subsidized housing inventory, or the 10% of our affordable housing stock that we need to be meet, so that we won't be, sort of having to worry about comprehensive permit 40B threat, as some might phrase it. We're still waiting for that number to come back. At this time, we are still anticipating that when those numbers do come in, that we will be approximately 25 units below where we will need to be at 10%. But again, until those numbers from the census do come in, we won't have a concrete number. So this is just a projection at this time. So with that, I'll turn it over if there are any questions on where we are right now.
Yep, we have a few questions. Jack?
Yeah, hi, Lauren. Thank you. Can you share with us what the condo developers have proposed their ideas to inclusionary zoning for the project? What have they suggested? What are the issues that they brought up?
Certainly, yes. So I believe you're referencing down in the harbor that the applicant there has proposed their proposal would be to include, they have to have a minimum of 3 units, because the way that our inclusionary zoning bylaw is structured, it's 10%. It does offer an option for a payment in lieu of provision of units, though that hasn't been really noted as a favorable option amongst any of the discussions in the committee and board levels in town. The applicant is proposing to provide a minimum of 3. They've also looked into whether there might be an opportunity to purchase, a 4 or 5 unit existing structure that they could then deed all of those as affordable housing. So right now they are proposing it would be off-site, not on-site. And again, that is subject to the planning board's approval. And that is one of the items that was flagged at our last meeting that needs to be, really concretely discussed, likely tomorrow and moving forward as we continue toward the end of this public hearing process.
Yeah, so it's kind of important to know that.
Certainly.
Lauren, I had a question about any work with the steering committee or anybody else on identifying units in town that are already affordable but aren't on the list, which I understand there are some of for various reasons.
Yes, certainly. One of the things that the Affordable Housing Steering Committee worked on in these recent discussions was sort of a chart as to what sort of options might be available, whether it was a procurement of private property, whether there's, town-owned property that might be available. So they did create a chart that I'd be happy to share with you, that sort of speed to delivery of how these units might go. And they have identified a couple of units throughout town. The real next step there would be to have sort of the paperwork and legal deed documents transferred. The only concern with a lot of those type of sites is that if you have it, you know, if you go through the process of deed restricting the unit, you don't want to evict the current tenant, and it may or may not be the case that
Right.
that tenant may not be, you know, may not meet the requirements of what it would be to live in those deed restricted affordable units to qualify on the SHI. So that's just a concern that that we're aware of as we look towards taking that initiative on. We don't want to displace anyone.
Great, thank you. Okay, all right, we want to move on. Any other questions?
Tracy?
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Lauren.
Tracy, could you go up to the next one? And I'm going to turn it over to Nicole to bring you up to date on the substance abuse, addiction, and mental health aspect of this goal.
Thank you, Miriam. Good evening, everyone. So for this goal in particular, it's a collaborative effort. We're working with the police department, Paul Pratt Memorial Library, Recreation Department, Board of Health, well, primarily public health agent, and Mary Goodwin. And our target goals have been and continue to be to decrease underage substance use, because that has an overall result of reducing adulthood addiction. With that said, we also know that there are current adults that are struggling with alcohol, marijuana, tobacco, prescription medication use, etc. So with prevention, we also are taking into consideration intervention, which I'll get into with access to treatment. How do we do that? Through collaboration, education, and program. In addition to this, we're looking to decrease stress and mental health amongst the youth and adult alike. We have seen an increase, you know, anecdotally, I think across the board in Cohasset, surrounding towns, Massachusetts, an increase in anxiety and depression as a result of COVID. But this was something that was already in existence prior to COVID. It's just been exacerbated. And in June, we did, as a group, provide their mental health modules. They're still up on the resources page for Safe Harbor. We have had one of the biggest engagement with the mental health modules in comparison to our surrounding towns. That's some data that we got from Ivy Watts, who runs those modules. So she's been keeping me up to date on, you know, we have 500 subscriptions for the entire town. Any community member in Cohasset, it's free. You go to this resource. And so just the fact that we've had the highest engagement is telling in itself. And then we also have our parent advisor through the town, Anne-Marie Wilton, who is anonymous, or keeps the person anonymous if they wish. They contact her for help in any source of issue, whether it's addiction or mental health, and she is here as a resource to the town to walk anyone through the process and getting to treatment and whatnot. And just in the past 2 weeks, we've seen an influx in calls and texts. So, you know, there's still a lot of work to be done, but the next slide, please. So those are our two main goals within this goal of the bigger goal. And how do we achieve this overall? These are the 7 strategies when it comes to reducing youth substance use. And this is really what we use as a coalition. And again, the foundation of a coalition is the collaboration of many organizations and departments. So this isn't just Safe Harbor. Safe Harbor in itself is the town of Cohasset. So providing information all the way down to modifying policies. Providing information is the one strategy that is super important. This is where you see flyers, brochures, presentations, speakers. Very important, but the least impactful when it comes to making change. It's very important in getting community awareness, to getting community readiness, but in order to see that greater change, you really want to go down the spectrum to changing physical design and modifying policies. So we just had a coalition meeting on December 3rd, and we are kind of pivoting now that we, you know, a lot of our programming and events were more so providing information and building skills. With that taking a backseat with COVID, that might be the only silver lining of COVID right now, is that we are able to pivot and look at how can we make those bigger impacts with our limited resources. So we're looking at changing some physical design, And that comes down to signage and surveillance, modifying policies, looking at our bylaws, etc. So next slide. So right now, this is currently just some examples. This is not limited to what is currently in the works in addressing and improving our community health when it comes to substance use and mental health. But these are just a few, and I won't read through them all, but just one by one, a quick example for providing information. Something that is in place currently is the Cohasset Public Schools Wellness Curriculum. It's phenomenal across the board. They start addressing this in the very first year of elementary school. We are taking a broader look on how can we expand what's already in place for the younger grades, so that we are catching we're just catching the problem earlier on and starting those conversations earlier and often, and passing that information in between students and parents and administration alike. Building skills, we have Narcan trainings at least twice a year, free to the public. Providing support. This is where we have recreation, library, safe harbor, providing safe opportunities, pro-social opportunities to socialize, build relationships. Establishing barriers to substance use or increasing treatment access. I think Cohasset is extremely fortunate to have Evoke on site, to have it in our backyard. They just opened at the end of November, and they're taking on new patients. And I think that will help in our data to see how many Cohasset residents have used it, and the number, because right now I should have started with the only data we really have to see if we've improved upon or not is youth data. The public schools administer a wellness survey every 2 years. So we're looking at spring of 2021 for our next one. The last one was April 2019. So that's really what we can compare to. And we have data on our website going back to 2015. So we can compare, have we improved upon underage substance use and their mental health, etc. We really don't have that tangible data for our adult members. It's more anecdotal. So having Evoke here will really help us kind of solidify, what's working and where are those gaps, and are residents of Cohasset utilizing it? Are they going elsewhere, etc. Changing the consequences, with incentives or disincentives. We are, again, fortunate enough for the nonprofit side of Safe Harbor to provide scholarships for students who are part of youth ambassadors. So any youth ambassador, we have 50 this year. If they are a senior, they can apply for a $1,000 scholarship towards their either college education or trade. We know that not everyone goes to college, so a scholarship towards their future. And then change in physical design. Again, this was kind of discussed at our coalition meeting, taking a look at Erin River Reservoir, other hot spots where a lot of underage substance use occurs, and looking at, is it possible to install signage and surveillance? How does that work? Who would have to be involved, etc. And then modifying policies. Again, we've done this in the past with marijuana. We had a bylaw in place where we wouldn't allow it within sales or distribution within Cohasset, and that's something that we can look at in addressing other bylaws that could potentially help us decrease our substance use and mental health. So on that note, we have youth ambassadors still meeting every Thursday. So this is still that pro-social extracurricular. And they have 3 main initiatives that they're working on. One is the Rainworks Initiative. They were planning on spraying this Thursday, but I think the weather has other plans. So the Rainworks Initiative is this paint. This was an example from last year, and we've learned how to do better so it doesn't bleed like this one. But it's a paint that only shows up when it rains or is a wet weather, gloomy day. and they are planning on doing some uplifting messages around town in the village area, so that on the gloomy days, just to kind of boost morale. So that will be postponed. Stay tuned. I think we're planning on spring next week. Mental Health Days Advocacy, they are currently working with Joan Moschino on some language and filing a bill at the state level, but they're also trying to pilot a program. They haven't started conversations yet with the school admin. They're still packaging, but looking to really reduce the stigma when it comes to mental health and implementing mental health days, where right now you have sick days. This would be implementing something. It's the policy handbook right now that would allow students, 4 times a year to really just recharge and recoup because of what we've seen with the uptick in anxiety and depression. And then lastly, Athletes Committed. This is a code of conduct that they're working with coaches and teachers and parents to really put the responsibility on the captains and the athletes themselves for those who are engaging in underage drinking, and kind of the domino effect of how it really falls on the entire team, and they're trying to rework that with their coaches. And so in the time of COVID, we've, as community services, have pivoted to place all of our youth programming on the town's virtual youth center. So Jen Orem has been amazing in keeping that up to date and keeping it organized. Obviously, we have a plan to have a physical teen center toward the end of 2021. But this is really to have that, again, that central location for our youth programming, virtual, and for those the very few that are able to occur in person.
Nicole, is there a website for that virtual teen center?
Yes, it's right on the main page of the town page.
Okay, so they can link from there.
Yes, yep. And it's that picture with the C heart YC. You just click on that tile. And then, of course, I'm biased, so I put the Safe Harbor additional resources. But if you go to Cohasset Recreation or Paul Pratt or the police department, etc., they all have additional resources. We just have the local data that I was referring to. Our parent advisor, the contact information is on there, additional mental health resources, and so on and so forth. And then the last slide, it's just to subscribe to our, well, this is bi-monthly, but it's bi-monthly newsletter to stay up to date on really what is going on, what we're focusing on, and how you can get involved.
Terrific. Thank you. Thanks for all the hard work. Oh, you got more. Sorry.
Oh, no, that's not me.
Oh, that's not you. Excellent. Any questions for Nicole other than
Nicole,
thanks and gratitude?
Do you want to update everyone on how many surveys have been completed?
Oh, sure. Let me get the real time. It has been, we are up to 469.
Oh.
So we're 31 away.
Great, thank you.
Have you started sort of aggregating the information at least so you?
Yes.
Yeah, good.
Definitely. Yep, absolutely. I'm keeping an eye on it every day, and I know that there are a few classes tomorrow that will be taking it. So we should be at the 500 mark by then.
We can.
Great, thank you.
Fantastic. Jack?
Yeah.
I'm just saying we're getting to where we can start planning to open up our youth center. And I think that we ought to plan to open it up when the vaccinations are going, and we'll open it up in April and May. And I think it's wonderful. And I think you're doing such a good job. The town owes Safe Harbor and the youth ambassadors and Nicole and everybody on your board a big debt of gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Nicole.
Thank
what
you.
he said. Yeah. Appreciate it.
Chris,
Happy holidays.
Is this my pickup on this one? Okay.
You're on, Chris.
So this is a goal that where the select board has taken, I think, is your primary one. And I just wanted to touch on a couple of things that have happened so far. There's been increased outreach to fill board and committee vacancies. I know the board members have all taken that on as a recruitment tool and gone out and reached more people. We've expanded the use of online resources. There's more ways to access the government electronically. That's been to a large extent because of COVID, but not exclusively. There's been a lot of collaboration across the community as part of the COVID pandemic. There's been a lot of cross-committee participation. There's been a lot of cross-organizational participation, all kinds of things going on to help with seniors, people who are at home, people who may have needed additional assistance. I think Nicole has talked about some of the things that the whole Safe Harbor world has done. The pumpkin example, Pumpkin Patch is one of those examples where there was a real cross-community engagement. We had the business community, we had families, we had the youth ambassadors, we really had the whole Safe Harbor Coalition. It was one of those great kind of community collaborations that COVID really gave rise to, but it really brought people together. And there's more of that coming, by the way. We have more things coming come spring. The most recent, I think, that was a real community engagement aspect was this whole regional campaign to protect public transportation, the proposed T-cuts, which Corey has already updated everyone about. And that was something that grew organically. It was like, we got to get out there. And there was a real effort made to reach out, to bring people together. So I think these are just some of the examples of what's gone on in the last 6 months to really bring people together and move forward on a whole host of issues.
Great. Thank you.
Great. Fantastic.
Another aspect of this first goal was diversity and inclusion. And we've really broken this down into 4 specific areas: conducting an ADA evaluation, Americans with Disabilities Act, and it gives us very specific guidelines to make sure that town services and certainly all aspects of employment include those with physical and mental challenges. The second part is reinvigorating the No Place for Hate community program. The third is sensitivity training for staff, board, committee members. This is, we're thinking in the lines of, if you were part of last night's training or the every other year ethics training, where we would continually keep people up to date on that. And then the last is integrating the age-friendly Cohasset initiative. Could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. Under the ADA self-evaluation, our town buildings are scheduled for the very specific ADA evaluation before the end of this month. They've started on it and should be done before January 1st. We've looked at our recruiting practices, making sure that we're reaching out to populations outside of our little bubble. And finally, we're reviewing our employment practices to make sure that we are physically and process-wise available to employees who may have challenges, either physical or cognitive challenges. Tracy, next one. As far as No Place for Hate, I have reached out to the co-chair asking to meet and to learn what, if anything, they have planned. Given the land of COVID, she's not yet gotten back to me, but we'll continue to try to coordinate and support each other's activities.
A question on the No Place for Hate, is that through the schools or?
That's through the Diversity Committee.
It's through the Diversity Committee. Okay, thanks.
And as far as training, we can call it sensitivity training generally, but really it's going to be training that focuses on the diversity, equality, and inclusion of Cohasset. So as far as staff is concerned, we had a team within the town that one individual really felt uncomfortable. She used the word hostile. And so we conducted some team building sessions with them where they were able to look at their own communication styles and each other's styles, and really began to understand that not everybody's the same. Not everybody speaks the same way or thinks the same way or makes decisions the same way. And I think it was very, very successful. We have scheduled a management session in January where we are going to have a speaker. It's online, of course. We're using a video of a speaker who talks about inclusion. I've seen her online and she's very good. And I think it'll be a session that really begins to open eyes to inclusivity that isn't just racial. And then we have assigned diversity training to managers online, and we're working with non-managers to do some online programs and training as well. As far as board and committee members, we have not yet scheduled anything. It will be along the lines as we did last night, where we will have a Zoom training session and record it so that it's available for those that who could not attend the live session. That will probably be February. And as far as the community is concerned, in addition to the programs that are already happening at the library and Wilcott Commons and through other departments like the Veterans Affairs Department and Safe Harbor, the Community Services Group, which is all of those plus recreation, have scheduled a virtual presentation by Dr. Grandin. And if you would mark your calendars now, she will be talking about how it is to be different. And that's March 23rd. So those are some of the training things. And now, as far as integration of the age-friendly initiative here in Cohasset, we have some upcoming programs. The Aging Mastery program was interrupted by COVID. The group that had been participating had decided that they did not want to do it virtually. So that will be one of the first programs that is started when we are back to live interaction. We also have a program called Pathways to Resilience, and it's a neurological and cognitive program, and that is scheduled for January. We also are reaching out to seniors and making sure that they have what they need. We're working with the churches, and that seems to be going very well. The Memory Cafe, which will be similar to the Monday Morning Cafe, but specifically designed to include those with memory issues, memory loss issues. And given the nature of memory loss, the decision has been made not to try to do it online. Those tasks would require a caregiver to go through all of that, and we just didn't want to put that on them during this time. But that will be another program that once we are back to live interaction will move forward. Some of the things that we have completed, we have gotten the information for the from the National Council on Aging, and the board, the council the board for Elder Affairs has decided that before we actually launch our certification program, because we have a maximum of 3 years to complete it, we wanted to wait and do a self-assessment first. And so we have begun self-assessing in the multiple areas that the certification program looks at. And so once we know where we can move very quickly. We will get those aspects of the certification program completed and have a plan to make sure that we can complete all other areas within the 3-year period. And then some upcoming events as it relates to the certification, we really are going to be looking for volunteers. There are 9 areas to this certification, and the board cannot be the only group that works on it. There's just not enough people. So as soon as we finish the self-assessment, we will be communicating our need for volunteers and hopefully find additional volunteers outside of the board. Then, and with that, are there any questions on the inclusion and diversity area?
Okay, nope.
Okay, thank you.
A couple of pieces on the goal of open and accessible government. The town launched the COVID-19 portal. We've been doing COVID-19 communications, but we formalized it. And I think it's been pretty well received. It's been well updated. It's a kind of a nice, more easily usable piece to the website. We can click right from the top. And that's given not only the weekly updates we do, but a lot of other information compiled to one place to make it more easily accessible for folks. All the meetings that we're doing on Zoom are now up on the town YouTube channel. So you can watch meetings you never even knew existed. So what's one of the benefits of the world we're in, right? You can watch the water board or the sewer board, or you can watch the Affordable Housing Steering Committee, right? There's all kinds of great stuff that are up there. So that's all up on the town. Yeah, it's out. You can watch the town of, it's a Town of Cohasset YouTube channel. So staff in house, Justine is doing a lot of that work for us. So thank you, Justine. Because they have to be just packaged and popped up there. So there's a lot of those meetings now are available. They don't go up immediately. It usually takes a little bit, but they're up there. There's a lot of them up there. If you're bored during the blizzard Thursday, just take a look at some of the meetings. Lots of great stuff actually to learn about. Open meeting law training, I think, was already referenced. That happened yesterday. That was great. That was an online session. I think it was well received, and it's now going to be available for people to watch going forward.
Very good turnout. Congratulations on that.
So I want to thank Miriam for pulling that together and all the work that was done. And thank you for Ellen and Jen for participating, Ellen Moore and Jen Warren for participating, and adding, and Paul Durensis, of course. Paul gave the whole legal piece, and Jen and Ellen gave kind of the functional pieces, which I think was a nice balance for the program. And then we've expanded our communications through social media channels and others by utilizing John Guilfoyle's office. And I think it's really helped. We've done more releases, press releases, and we've done more information. We've done some great videos. I think it's really helped us up our game on getting more information out to the public. And we're going to continue to do more of those things. So that's just some highlights of what we've tried to do. And I think that draws to the conclusion, community health.
Great. Thank you. Thank all of you for all your hard work and keeping these goals focused. They're important to us and they're important to the community. And I'm really thrilled and impressed with all the work you've done. And I don't want to belabor anything more. So I'm going to move us along on the agenda unless anybody has a question or a comment. Great. Thank you. Happy holidays. Thanks for hanging in there with us.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
And thank everybody. This has been a great collaboration. This is one of those great pieces. The select board set the bar. We go back, we collaborate with staff, we collaborate with community groups. It's really been, it makes the goals so much more community oriented, right? And it's really, I think, a great thing for the staff to engage and grab onto. So thank you.
And just the interdepartmental, I mean, just the fact that Safe Harbor is working with the library and the schools, and then the elder affairs piece comes in. And so it really, you are executing on, I think, the vision that the board had. So I appreciate that.
So speaking of vision, so we're looking into the future. And I'm going to pop up on the screen. A quick look at a calendar here. Let me see if I can take a look. So
Chris, you need the vote tonight on town meeting?
Yeah, so this is what I'm going to need you to act on tonight. This is my recommendation to you tonight. is that you set the annual town meeting and potentially a special town meeting, but definitely the annual town meeting for May 24th. That is the last non-holiday Monday in the month of May, because May 31st is Memorial Day.
Oh, that's late.
The annual town election for June 5th. I want to be clear, both of these are I mean, if we get into January and you decide we got to go a little bit further out, we can do that. We wouldn't move them any closer in, but this would be, what this does is it gives us another month, really the month of January, to kind of see what's going on, see how the vaccinations go, see what's going on in the state budget, and kind of, if anything, it's possible things are going to get tighter in December, January, and maybe harder for people to even interact. So I just think it buys us time to prep. So that's my recommendation to you folks. The bylaw requires the town meeting be set in March, April, or May. So we can't actually set it for June right now. You can move it to June under the state state emergency declarations, but I don't believe you can initially set it. So this is the latest date, unless you want to do a Saturday. I mean, if you want to do it a Saturday, we'll have to reset the dates. But this would be a traditional Monday evening. Though again, you're not setting a time yet, but this is the 24th is a Monday. And again, just to look at the calendar kind of quickly, we've already done the capital request internally, and the capital budget committee met Monday, and they've actually started reviewing capital items. So that's well underway, which is great. The budget requests for departments have already gone out. They're scheduled back in early in January, and then we'll do internal meetings. As I think Katie already noted, the requests for departments, for boards and committees to say, hey, these are warrant articles we're looking to possibly do. That's out. We're looking to get that back in January so we can plan a little bit ahead for that. The enterprise fund budgets will be due January 22nd. They're aware, they've been noticed, so that we'll have the water and sewer budgets. And then the presentation of the budget would be on February 23rd. So that would be the presentation to the select board, to the advisory committee on that the evening of the 23rd. That'll be the town side budget presentation. And then you go right into review with joint sessions. These were scheduled before, but they're kind of more laid out now. A joint session on water and sewer, a joint session on citizen petitions, a joint session on the capital budget and the community preservation budget proposed, and a joint session on the school budget, which is usually the last one in the process. And you'd have other discussions besides those as well. You get to the final recommendations at the end of April. We go to the printer. And again, the key here is that we might do a special inside the annual. I think we'll have to have more conversations with council about whether or not we need to do that. Typically, we would have done housekeeping in the fall, move free cash around and all of those things. We might be able to do that in the confines of a regular town meeting. We don't normally do that, but we possibly could. Some communities do that. So I'm just leaving it on here as a placeholder depending on where we end up. Because a special town meeting has a slightly different rules. It requires a 2-week advance notice of the warrant, not just one. I mean, obviously people know about the warrant well in advance, but it has to be in people's homes 2 weeks ahead. The annual meeting warrant only has to be 1 week ahead. It also builds in plenty of time for the public forums we've done, and there's other dates in here that the clerk she wants to validate again. She gave them to me, but she just wanted to sleep on them again. If, for example, 19th would be a problematic date. That's actually a public holiday, so I don't know if that would actually be the last day to submit nomination papers. She's got to go back and check that out. That's still Patriots Day. So that is a look at a proposed calendar, which is, again, I gave you one back about a month and a half ago. This is a one based on a May 24th annual town meeting.
Okay. And just at a future meeting, I would like to just kind of overlay some other public opportunities. I've had some conversations with the League of Women Voters in Hingham, which has a lot of Cohasset citizens. And I think the sooner we can socialize some of, especially any land use articles. And then a really quick question on the water operating budget. Last spring, they were thinking about putting forth a rate increase. And I think that if that is going to be back on the table, we need to have that out in public and discussed sooner rather than later. So we might want to, cue that conversation up at least initially in January.
That's one of the things that there's actually time in January and February to have some of these kind of forums and discussions about potential articles before they kind of lock into a warrant. So, and which is, you've already started, right? The session you did last Thursday included some of that conversation.
Yeah.
And as Katie presented tonight with the master plan, there's part of that too. You know, we kind of build to the warrant all year long anyway. It's like an
Right.
and this year we've started earlier, and I think it's good because it's while it's great to be able to pull everybody together from wherever they are, it's sometimes harder to have the conversations in this kind of a forum. So
right.
Well,
Well, just the whole idea of public input, it just gets us, especially with things that we know are going to be controversial or going to have, lots of people on both sides of the vote, that the sooner we have the conversations, the better. So Carrie, you had your hand up.
Yeah, this looks good, Chris. I think the date sounds good for town meeting, but I also think we may want to leave open the possibility of having it in a few different locations. So if we want to do the drive-in option, again, that should be on the table as opposed to our traditional high school plan. So I would say we want to wait on determining location.
We're only obligated to the date, right?
Right. This is just a date. And again, so thank you for bringing that up, Carrie, because we have reached out tentatively to the company that did our drive-through last year. And we're also going to explore outside options. Obviously, the high school field would be a great one. Of course, there's spring sports going on at that point. We don't end up at a conflict. But that's a great location to do an outside meeting under a tent or something. Even the music circus could be an outside location as well. I mean, if they have there's lots of. One of the things that I think we might do is go a little earlier as well. Instead of starting at 7, maybe start a little earlier that evening. The alternative would be to go to the problem with late May is that literally the next weekend is Memorial Day weekend. So I don't know that having a town meeting on any of those days that weekend would necessarily be a good idea for access. So and this pushes us as late as we can go in May comfortably at this point. If the worst issues, you still have the month of June to kick back to if you need to. But I think it also allows us, we get this done. There's a month to do some, if we do a special, move money around and do some project funding. So.
Okay.
I remember the board can still change it. You can still change the date. By bylaw now. And then if you come January, you say, well, we really want to change the date, push it out a little bit further.
But we couldn't move it back.
Well, you theoretically could do that too. The problem with moving it back is that you kind of squish it back on.
Sure.
Yeah. So moving it back would be problematic unless you did it immediately in early January, because there's a lot of back, like presenting the budget, all of those things kind of click.
Okay, any other questions, comments for Chris? Otherwise, I'll ask for a motion.
I move that we approve the schedule as presented.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, and just for clarification, it's the most important date in that is setting May 24th, Monday, May 24th as the annual town meeting date.
And June 5th is the annual town election.
And June 5th is the annual town election.
That's a Saturday, just to be clear. That's
great. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any last minute comments? All right, I'll call for a roll call vote, please.
Jack Creighton, aye.
Corey Evans, aye.
Diane Kennedy, aye.
Carrie Thompson, aye.
Great.
Thank you very much.
If we can do speed round, we can get out by 10.
So speed limits, look at speed round. So I'm going to be sending all of you some holiday reading material in either the first or second meeting of January. We're going to ask the board to consider one of two options: either a townwide base speed limit with the posting of the signs on the borders and all of that with adjustments made as needed, or on the alternative, a process where the board says, here community, here neighborhood, if you want a speed limit, here's how you do it. Because we really kind of, the speed limits are kind of all over the place anyway, and it's really time that we have a process. So it's either a clean process that everybody knows how to do it, or you just establish the base speed limit all over. So we'll have some stuff for you to chew on, and then you'll be able to do something in January and get public input. And once I circulate the materials, you're free to circulate them and get as much public input as you want between now and the meeting in January. I did want to share quickly a couple of news infos too. As you already heard, the storm is brewing, looking like it's going to be more Thursday. The schools have gone fully remote for Thursday. No snow, fully remote. So people who are in the cohort B, I believe it is, are going to be all at home, including the people who are regularly there in cohort A. Town hall and our library will also go fully remote. We're not closed, but we're going to be remote. So there won't be people in the buildings. We'll be checking messages, we'll be checking emails. We've moved the warrant up, so we're going to pay our bills tomorrow as opposed to Thursday. So we've made some adjustments for that. Obviously, won't be able to be doing field inspections or those kinds of things. That'll have to be rescheduled. You won't be able to pick up materials at the library, but you'll be able to still order them and consult with folks. So just to plan for that, everybody. We're going to go virtual Thursday for both schools and town. And I was trying to get these up to show you before, and I just wanted to show a couple of these. These are pictures from earlier today. This is the kind of day we had, right? That was a car fire up on Aaron River Road. It was really quite dramatic.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Did Bill take those pictures?
Yes, Bill did. Bill's a great photographer, I got to tell you. And this, by the way, this is the car that took out the pole. Okay, so and that's the pole. As you can see, there is no more pole, right? It's just severed. So this is why people lost power today. That car is crushed, right? That's one of the reasons people should not text and drive, right? Dangerous, dangerous, dangerous. So, and also very inconvenient. Unfortunately, the person was not hurt. That's good news. The person, but unfortunately, a lot of people were gravely inconvenienced. And that is probably one of the worst places in town for to take out a pole. You can see I was leaning over. So that's the update on that. So, and then I'll be pushing out the holiday dates, but just so everybody remembers, we're closed Friday, the 25th. We're closed January 1st. There'll be a half day on the 24th. Town hall will close early on the 24th of December for Christmas Eve. It'll be open regular hours on New Year's Eve. So we'll close at 4:30, 1 o'clock on Christmas Eve, 4:30 on New Year's Eve. And then, well, we've been open late on Tuesdays regularly, appointment only, but it's available. We're going to close early on December 29th because Ron and his team will be doing phone system upgrades. So we're going to close a little early, regular time, 4:30 on the 29th, as opposed to 7, just because it'll allow Ron's team a little more ease of getting this phone system upgrades done. So they'll be posting more of that information for everyone to see. And I myself will be trying to sneak away next week for a few days. So I will take my Christmas early, but I'll be available, not very far away. So that's my quick update, and Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Hanukkah to all. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Selectman comment period, starting with Jack.
Merry Christmas to everybody. We've had a tough 2020. Let's hope that 2021 is a lot better, and I'm sure that it will be, because in 2021 we're going to celebrate the opening of our new youth center. Okay. Merry Christmas.
Jack. Merry Christmas. Corey.
All right, I'm going to end on a little bit of a downer here. So one of the things that I'm involved in is the Cohasset 143 TV station. I learned today that the town owes the station $127,685.16. The reason for that is because of kind of a change in how funding the state was allowing the town to disperse funding. And one thing I've mentioned to all of you before is that by not having a special town meeting, we're not able to get that funding. And if we continue on until May, that number is probably going to be in the 200,000 range. Now, that's caused 143 TV to need to draw from capital accounts or savings account just to fund operations. And this is not a sustainable way to work. And if we're going to make this station, which is really part of the community, viable, we need to think of a new way to work funding for this, because relying on this, twice a year system has too many opportunities for problems. I've had a few discussions with Don and Chris about it, but I'd like to bring it in front of the board and have on an agenda a long-term discussion with Chris, with Don, with maybe town council about another way we can make this funding happen, because the station's never going to be successful if we're waiting for $250,000, which the people of this town have paid, not in taxes, but in surcharges on their bill that's now being held in an account somewhere, and it's not being able to be put to good use. So that is my soapbox. Thank you for listening. Any questions on that?
No, well, Chris, I was under the impression that there was something that we could do. So could we have a discussion as early as our first meeting in January on this?
We can. I will tell you that without going too deep into this, that I did talk to Don, and there's really nothing we can do. The state has not given us any alternatives. There are different methods, though. Town meeting would have to approve a different method, and I can't speak to them tonight, but we most certainly can in January.
Okay, well,
let's put
our alternative, but town meeting will have to approve a different method, like we did. Of course.
And we will have that discussion as early as we can. Thank you.
And again, this all goes back to state changes, so it's nothing town.
I get it.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah,
This is just
but
right. This is state changes, but we got to fix it because it's starting to hurt the channel. And then that is it. Merry Christmas. Thank you, everybody. Please stay safe on Thursday.
Yeah,
and
please.
we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Corey. Carrie.
Yes, if you're still looking for holiday gifts, please support our Cohasset card program. Go to cohassetchamber.org and purchase a Cohasset card for yourself, for friends, for family. There are so many local businesses in our town that are participating in this, more than 30 right now. It's really helping stimulate a lot of our local businesses at a time that they really need it. So cohassetchamber.org, please buy some, and happy holidays.
Quick question on that. Is it only available online, or are the merchants selling it, or is
only available online?
Yeah,
only available online. Great, thank you. Really quickly, we have two resignations on a board and a committee in town that I just want to update everybody on, so that over the next couple of weeks we can look for people that might want to fill the slots. James Rosebach has resigned from the Conservation Commission, so we're the appointing authority. We would need to maybe one of their associate members would be interested in it, but if you know anybody that could take a position on Concom, have them submit an application. And John Beck has resigned from the Sewer Commission. The way that's an elected position, so that would ultimately be a joint appointment between the select board and the Sewer Commission, and we'll take that up as soon as we have some viable candidates. Obviously, it's a really important position. We wish John well. We thank him for many years of incredible leadership within the town and in the Sewer Commission. So with that, we do have one set of minutes from November 17th, 2020. If anybody would like to move the minutes.
I move that we approve the minutes from November 17th, 2020.
Is there a second?
Madam Chair, I didn't have that in my packet. Were those, Carrie, did you see them?
I didn't.
I just didn't. I saw that they were on the thing, but I never actually.
Okay,
I don't think
let's.
I thought they were. Yeah, no, I
didn't see them.
I saw them. Okay, let's postpone that vote.
Apologies.
Nope, no problem.
No,
Thank
good. We got to adjourn faster.
Yeah. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, stay safe. Thank you, everybody, for working so hard. So a motion to adjourn, please.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All right, roll call.
Jack Creighton, Merry Christmas, and I.
Ravens, aye.
Diane Kennedy, aye.
Carrie Thompson, aye.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much.
That's all right. On the select board 2020.
That's a wrap. 2020. We're done.
See you next year.
Good night,
Happy New
everybody.
Year.